And it's on mute. Um, Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot Podcast here on HawkFanatic.com. It is Thursday, January the 18th, little after 9 a.m. Central Time. You may hear my dogs wrestling in the background. They'll wear themselves out soon. We have a Lhasa-Poo who thinks he's 100 pounds and a puppy who thinks he's like 2 pounds. So they're going at it right now. I am Rob Howe. That is Scott Docterman. If you're watching us on the YouTube feed from The Athletic, again, January the 18th, and yeah, I was still looking for an offensive coordinator, Scott, or at least we don't have an announcement yet.
Yeah, we're all looking for something, I suppose, but at this point it's I mean, it's almost like you laugh, you throw your hands up. I mean, what have we, earlier this week when got a couple of notes from people that said, yeah, the ship has sailed on Paul Christ, and I'm like, damn, now what? Now where do we look? There's I'm going through different programs, their offensive coordinators, which ones would actually make sense for Iowa, because it's not like they're going to, they're going to go with a Mike Leach disciple, to do this, so I made a list. I actually had a Twitter poll the other day, who would do it. And I tell you what, it's like we're running on a treadmill, and it's like, okay, how much longer? Well, it's going until we tell you not to. And that's where we are. I mean, we're almost 3 months from when Brian Ferentz was told he wasn't going to return.
October the 30th, right?
Yes, it's October the 30th, and we're January 18th. And, the interesting thing, Rob, is it's going according to Ferentz's timeline, but the timeline is a little archaic in today's world. I mean, I understand he didn't want to do anything during the season. Okay. That you're working, you're doing everything. But once the season concluded, after the Big Ten championship game, then it's kind of time to take a step and move forward. Okay, let's look at some of these guys. And instead it's like, no, we're going to get prepared for the bowl game. And then after the bowl game,
that worked out.
Yeah. You probably could add no offensive coordinator and it worked just as well, right?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, focus on your current team while you're in season, but after that Big Ten championship game, we all know what bowl prep is, and it's developing your young guys, and there's so much time there. Finals are earlier in the month. There's a lot of downtime there. It just, and even during the season, I mean, I think most coaches, athletic directors, if they have, if they're in charge of personnel, they have lists of, okay, if this guy leaves, if I have to get there, you have that list of guys that could be candidates. So I don't know. It seems, but I guess at the end of the day, if you get the right guy, does it really matter? And whoever he announces now, there's going to be a reaction, or whenever he announces, there's going to be a reaction. But really, at least from my perspective, after the last few years and what we heard going into the season about how things were going to be, and then they weren't, I'm taking a wait and see approach anyway, no matter who it is, because we don't know how whoever it is going to work with Kirk.
Sure. And, the other part is there's going to be a honeymoon period for whoever it is. I mean, there's going to be the natural, whoa, who's this? And for the most part, there'll be some people who just be sad because it's over. It's kind of like Christmas. You got everything you wanted, but you're still disappointed Christmas is over. But then there's going to be people who are excited. And then most of the fans will rally around the flag and get, okay, we'll give this guy a chance and look into it and get excited. And then we'll, I obviously we'll probably split our writing on. Part of it'll be, wow, what a great hire. And then other parts will be like, well, let's give it a wait and see approach.
That's me.
Yeah. And after the last few years, it's like, shame on me, shame on me. And, yeah, let's face it, though, they are going to be a much improved offense next year. And that could be going from 133 to 132.
Yeah.
Because there's like 25 yards per game difference between those two.
And I think there's whoever it is stepping into a position following somebody who is arguably the most disliked, for lack of a better word. His job performance is the most disliked of anybody that has been on this staff in the last quarter century. So you get that part, and I think that plays into your honeymoon theory, Scott, is it's not Brian Ferentz, it's somebody else. It's not Spencer Petras, right? It's another quarterback, whoever that is. It's that public perception. I'm not saying whoever it is going to be better than Brian Ferentz. It'd be hard to be worse, at least statistically. Was the quarterback played better this year than it was with Spencer Petras?
No.
So we don't know. We speculate, we analyze, we try to go over this stuff and figure out what the outcomes may be. But really, it's such an important hire that, as kind of frustrating and impatient as we are for Kirk Ferentz to name somebody to that position, to me, it's just get it right.
Well, what's been, to compare Kirk and Brian, what's the downside and what's the upside of waiting, of dragging your feet, whatever? It's because this has been going on for so long. Everybody wants closure.
Yeah.
Us, the fans, probably even people on the staff, that aren't directly, and some that are directly impacted. So what's the downside in waiting? Well, you could say maybe they weren't able to get somebody in the portal, possibly, but for the most part, I don't know that they're going to get anybody anyway. I mean, unless they had a really strong connection, the new OC with somebody, it's really going to just be wait until April, May period anyway, before you get into that period. And so I don't see that there's really much of downside to waiting. It's just the annoyance of it. It's like, come on, man. Yeah. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting because there's no game until September or August 31st or whatever. But everybody wants to move on. This has been such a aggravating, especially the last 2 years, once Kirk announced Brian was moving to the quarterback's coach, that really the last 2 years has just been angst ridden for everybody when it comes to the offense. And so you just want that closure, that change, that look ahead. We want to analyze what the OC was like wherever he was. And we haven't gotten that yet. And hopefully soon, hopefully we can move on and write about that and, analyze it and, embellish and do whatever.
I mean, I think a downside could be, is he missing out on potential candidates by waiting? Mm-hmm. Are people that may be interested pulling out because of the length of time that it's taking to name somebody? That to me is a detriment. And then kind of in conjunction with that, Scott, is we are very aware of the reputation that Iowa's offense has developed over the last few years from a national perspective. We're not the only ones seeing that. The media is not the only one seeing that. Coaches around the country see that. So how much is that holding back the potential of somebody coming in here? You have to find somebody who's like, I don't care. I can do this wherever, right? And you want somebody like that. But you also may have somebody who's pretty qualified who says, that's a death sentence. I'm not doing that. So that probably plays into this timeline as well, trying to figure out who is a candidate, who wants to be here. And then while you're doing that, are you missing out on people?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot there. And it's fascinating because, how much of the true story do we get? Maybe we'll get some. I don't know about all of it, but yeah, you're right. I mean, how many candidates or potential candidates said, I don't know, man, I've seen the way that operates. And then maybe they got to talking to Kirk. Maybe they were interested and they thought, well, there's going to be he won't let me run it the way I want to. Or maybe Kirk's saying, you know what, you can run it the way you want to, as long as it's within this foundation. And maybe some people are like, that's too much for me. Or some people might say, yeah, that's fine. That's exactly what I want. I think overall that, but Iowa put itself in this position, and Kirk did with Brian, and then the issues over the years. I mean, I remember in the summer of 2022, I think it was Chad over at Indianapolis asked something about the offense, and he said something like, "Oh yeah, we should be improved," and then Kirk's like, "Man, it must be bad out there," and then the last 2 years have been statistically the worst 2 years since 1984. I mean, in the Big Ten play, in 40 years, and the world has changed so much that you can make the case this is the worst offense in modern college football history. And I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm being truthful here. And yet to still win 10 games shows there's a lot of positives here. But this has you've got to get with the times. And it just, no matter if you think it was Brian's fault or not, ultimately it was, because the offense failed, and it failed multiple years, not just 1 year.
And I think smart candidates know that it wasn't just Brian Ferentz's fault.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what are you if you're looking at this job, what are you analyzing? What are you evaluating? What's the quarterback position look like? What do I have at receiver? Do I have guys coming back on the offensive line? What's the running back room look like? Tight end, personnel, right? And I'm not knocking anybody, any particular player, but what would that evaluation look like? And how attractive is that for a potential candidate? I think it's a fair question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you look at objectively at Iowa right now, and I think if you're a OC / passing game quarterbacks coach type, I think you've got to be, you would almost be excited about it in some ways, because you are starting at the bare bones. That passing system needs to be scrapped. It is horrible. It needs to change dramatically. And you have all the tools at your disposal to do it. Now, do you have the personnel to do it? That's a different question. Do you think that Cade McNamara is good enough, or you feel like, oh man, I'm going to be chained to that guy and I don't really want him? What do you think of the backups? Well, Deacon Hill didn't play very well, and I don't know if any, quarterback coach can make him play much better. Can you bring in your own guy? Well, yeah, maybe, that sort of thing. And then you look at the other aspects, veteran offensive line with the potential for another addition that might make them a little bit better. Some quality running backs, I think, and maybe the best tight end in the country, and a couple others who are pretty good too, and ascending players. So I think they're, by and large, you would be looking at this offense saying, yeah, I can make this better, and then the passing game, I can make it my own. But do I have the pieces in place to do that? And how much will the head coach let me go that route? Yeah, I think those are all fair questions. I think I've characterized it probably in the manner that most OCs that would fit philosophically with Kirk would be thinking of it. And now it's just a matter of executing and getting the person. And the other factor is, Rob, if you are an OC and you aspire to be a head coach, this is a situation where you fix Iowa, you could write your ticket. I mean, the person I've thrown out there lately, just because I don't have anybody else to throw out there, we've got exhausted our candidate pool, is Tommy Rees, who was quarterback at Notre Dame, then OC at Notre Dame, offensive quarterbacks coach, and then went to Alabama. He's out of a job, not for his own problem, but just simply because they made a change, and Ryan Grubb's terrific. And so he's looking for a job. If he comes to Iowa and let's say he elevates Iowa to the mid-pack statistically and makes the passing game go. I mean, with Iowa's defense, if you can make the Iowa the 60th or 65th best offense in a year, this team's going to the playoff next year. I have no doubt about that. And then you can kind of write your ticket, say, hey, look what I did there. I was OC at Notre Dame, Alabama. Alabama, we got to the playoff. Went to Iowa, got to the playoff. With that offense, somebody's going to say, yeah, we want that guy. And it might be Iowa pretty shortly.
And Kirk has said this publicly recently. One of the most recent times he's spoken publicly, he wants an offensive coordinator that's committed to complementary football. So, if he's telling us that and the public that, he's telling the candidates that. And that's a broad statement, right? What does that mean? And what does, how does that fit with whoever they hire? How does he view complementary football? So, it's a lot. You have to find the right fit. You look like you have something on your mind.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Beth Getz has just been announced as the.
Hey, breaking news on the Hotspot podcast. Gather around, kids. It's a rarity here. Usually this stuff happens at about 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning when we shut down operations here. But congratulations to Beth. Much deserved. I think it was anticipated by many of us. She's done a really good job. She's certainly got a feather in her cap by making the move with the football program that we've talked about here for the last 20 minutes. So she got off on the right foot there, but she's got a lot in front of her, Scott. She's got, I'm 56, so I guess I can say this, aging coaches that are older. She's
old dudes.
Yeah, old dudes and old dudettes like Lisa Bluter. They're all in a hell of a lot better shape than I am. They're all, they're all the winningest coaches in the program history, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other than Tom Brands, who's
right.
got chased down Dan Gable, but the men's, women's basketball, and football all are the winningest coaches in the history of their programs. Right. So that tells you they're not going to be here forever.
Well, exactly. They're between the ages of 68 and 62, and Bluter and it's not too much longer before Bluter's 63 and Fran is 65 and Kirk, of course, is 68. And so we've sorry for kind of fading out there, but I was like, oh shoot, But this is a huge move for her. This is a huge move for the athletics department. It's something that's needed to happen. Obviously, it should have happened a couple months ago, frankly. And but overall, I think this is just you might have to have succession on your mind earlier than you expect for maybe at least one of those positions. It wouldn't surprise me at all if maybe Fran decides to leave a year or two. And when Jack's done with high school, maybe even before that. Lisa's probably the one that I would imagine stays the longest, but you never know. And then Kirk at 68, it's a year-to-year type of thing for me. I mean, he's in great shape, health-wise, likes what he's doing. And frankly, if you're winning 10 games a year, as much as we can complain about the offense, that's still a hell of an accomplishment, but he's not going to be there forever either. Hayden was 70, I think, when he shut it down, 69 or 70. So he's in better shape than Hayden was by far, but still, even if it's 2 years down the road, 3 years, 5 years, that's still not very long. So overall, I think it's something that we've got to, that to me is priority number one, is figure out who your candidates might be for those jobs and ensure that the ones that are here, if you want them to be here, stay as long as you can.
Yes, no doubt. And I'm sure she was involved in the news earlier this week of Seth Wallace being promoted to assistant head coach and the raises that he and Phil Parker were given. So she's done a lot already with the interim tag. Now she gets kind of, the seatbelt. Well, that's a bad analogy. She's now free to kind of dig in a little bit more, and all the things that she has analyzed, evaluated since she took over in the summer. I'm sure she's got, a to-do list. And like you said, one of them is let's start compiling lists of potential candidates. And she has relationships. She's been in the business a while. So, there's networking, there's connections, there's things like that that will help her along the way in terms of putting together those lists. And by all accounts, she was the right person for the job. And now she gets to prove it. Now she gets to show people she can bring this athletic department into this new age, something that I think where Gary Barta fell behind, and we saw it with the NIL relationship. She's mended that. She's, focused on what is important going forward with the new landscape in college athletics. And that to me is the most exciting part about this hire, is that she, at least to this point, has shown to be proactive instead of reactive. And that's what you need in this position.
One of the things that, among the many things that I've liked about her and getting to know her and listening to her, and is that she is quite the listener, that she has ideas and thoughts, but she also wants to she wants to get details from everybody. And that includes peons like us, media, that we've had conversations about, a couple months ago was like Charlie Baker's speech in the NCAA about paying athletes and stuff. She's like, "What do you think?" And she genuinely wanted to know what I thought. And one of the things she said is like, she goes, it's good to finally have somebody who you feel like is looking forward instead of always trying to look behind. And I think that's the best part here, is she understands the landscape for what it is and what it will be, not for what you want it to be. And I think Gary did some good things, and he also was rough. And I think there's a lot of people that would prefer to talk about the bad rather than the good, but there was some good. But he was for a different era, and this era of this NIL, of collectives, of all the other things that are going on, he was behind the times, significantly behind the times, and not meeting with the collective and not trying to move forward in that area. And Beth is the exact opposite. She understands that it's going to be more of a partnership, not just big me, little you. And I think that's refreshing. The situation with Brian Ferentz, she handled it about as well as she could have. She's not the one pulling the trigger on that. I mean, what interim AD will have the clout by themselves to do that with, the dean of college football coach's son, at the middle of the year? I mean, she was handed the gun, and she said, and the president said, "I'll take the cannolis, you fire the shot," But she handled it well. And I think she's, some of the things that she's talked about, she wants to bring the students to the floor. There's going to be a renovation of Carver Hawkeye Arena. Last year, Kirk Ferentz had a $7 million pool for his assistants. That's going way up now. You need to. It's football, and as much as people may go, "Oh my God, that's a lot of money to pay." You know what? You're either in, as Bob Bowlesby said 20 years ago, you're either in the race or you're not.
Takes money to make money.
Yeah, and you got to be. So I think overall, that's where we're at. And so anyway, I think this is a great hire. From the people I've talked to, football is a little different, but everybody else swears by her and has for a long time. She's a breath of fresh air. She comes to our practices. She watches our practices. She cares about our athletes. She wants to know, and she was a player. She was a coach. She was an administrator of all the so-called small sports. But, I have a quote in my story once it publishes here in a minute, from Jan Jensen about, she's like, when we went to the Final Four, I was working on film, I was doing things, and then I'd come up and I'd see Beth, and she's working again, and she's working hard, and on and on and on and on. And it's like, overall, she's the type of person that they all respect and cares. And when she was named interim and she had that press conference in August, Rob, she was, all the women's basketball coaches came to support her. And that was right after they flew back all night from Croatia. And so, and what Jan told me was, "Hey, how do you tell that person that they're your person? You're there for her, or her, him, whatever." So I think that was really impactful. So
I think you made the best maybe the best trait she has is the ability to listen and wanting to collaborate. And yeah, she's the boss and she has to make the final decision. She has to make the tough calls. But she's willing to work with people in the athletic department, coaches, other people in administration. I think that in this world of college athletics, you need that. You need somebody who's willing to be a little bit flexible and be able to meet the needs, because there are so many moving parts constantly. And we see, I mean, just since we've started this podcast before NIL, and we've watched the stages and the changes in college athletics, she seems like she has that flexibility and foresight that you need. And I trust the people that trust her, so to speak. And that means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Lisa Bluter, when I asked her about Beth back in the fall, and she's like, you can't get all the coaches to agree on anything. And everybody agrees on her. If we don't name her, she kind of tripped over her words, but she said it would be the not smartest thing we've ever done at the University of Iowa. And if you've got that kind of backing, when we have, statue coaches, and Ferentz and Bluter, and you have, all-time wins leader and McCaffrey, and you have Brands, who's had his level of success, but also other people. Rick Heller was on the search committee, and he was very much in support of her at the highest level. I mean, I talked to him just on the side. I think it was at the basketball game at Kinnick, and he's like, oh, she's great. She's everything. She's exactly what we need here. And so when you've run that gambit, when Tom Brands is at a PCA, he's like, he goes, I'm not the king or anything, but we need to take that interim tag off you. You got Brands and Heller, and you've got Jan Jensen, and you got Lisa Bluter, and football's, they have a situation that probably, but I still think there's a respect there, if nothing else. And maybe it's good. Maybe it's good that football's the one getting checked, because it needed to get checked. It hasn't been checked for a long, 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 long time, probably since Bob Bowlesby was there. So maybe it's a good thing that there's somebody that's not going to be a yes person for football. So overall, I think people should be very excited about this hire and rally around it.
Yes, and football is the front porch, so to speak, and you need the football to excel and do well for your whole athletic department. But that the other people in the athletic department feel valued by the boss and know that they have a voice as well. That's really important, because I don't think you get that all over the country. Usually it's almost a separate entity, but there needs to be that collaborative effort that I talked about earlier. And if we're talking about statues, there should be a statue of the previous female athletic director at Iowa, Beth, walking in the footsteps of Christine Grant, who not only changed things here and advanced things here, but worldwide. She was incredible. And I know you had chances to interview Christine, and so did I. Mm-hmm. And I see some similarities between her and Beth, and that's good.
Yeah. Christine, as we know, I wrote about her with the 50th anniversary of Title IX a couple of years ago, and what she would have meant, and talking to several coaches, and just the respect that she has. But respect is one of those things where you get it when you see it, but if you have to ask for it or demand it, then I think overall, then there's an issue. And I don't think there was ever an issue with Christine, and there certainly isn't with Beth thus far. And and going back to kind of your discussion about the football situation, by the way, there'll be a press conference on Tuesday afternoon. The football situation, not only can she kind of check football, but also give them the resources that they need. As we said with, okay, Phil Parker, here's $500K increase. You're the best assistant in the country. We're going to put Seth Wallace as the assistant head coach. Probably give them a bump on the offensive coordinator. Obviously, you're going to have to, unless you want me to do it, and I'll do it for less than Brian. Might be a little tough for a while, but you provide the resources.
How do you feel about complimentary football?
It's kind of the John McKay quip from the Buccaneers, back then. What do you feel like your team's execution? I'm in favor of it, but seriously, I mean, this department is more than football. Football is the biggest entity in the University of Iowa. It's bigger than even the writing college, which is hard to say, but true. Maybe the hospital might be bigger than football, but still, it's the front porch to the university, and how football does is kind of shapes everything about it. If you provide them with the resources and you support them in whatever measures, but you're also there to be the boss and to be, the strength, then there's zero wrong with it, because again, Kirk's 68 years old. He's going to be 69 in August. How much longer is he going to do this? It's bigger than Kirk Ferentz, and but then also have support Lisa Bluter, and Beth is the one that was really made it happen with the Kinnick situation. Playing at Kinnick, and she was the force of the Final Four, and so there's a lot there that I think people will respect, and if this brings Iowa up, and let's face it, Rob, they've had some issues with Title IX and gender equity for a little while. This isn't a bad hire when it comes to that situation.
No, not at all. And that's certainly important in the grand scheme of things. I know there are people, I've seen people, some comments in the chat room that I won't repeat about, hey, I usually don't support females for a position like this, but I'm all in favor of Beth. So she has that going for her.
Yeah.
And there are going to be people, Scott, that, we saw that when she was named interim and there was talk about her getting the permanent position. There was pushback by some people. Some of them, for lack of a better term, Neanderthals.
Yeah, right.
But that really doesn't matter because she has the support of the university and the people in her department to be able to do her job. So the other people are just going to have to get over it.
Yeah, right. And and those are the people that say, well, we want Bob Stoops to be the AD. It's like, no, you don't. I mean, this is not 1984. Bump Elliott was fantastic as an AD in that era. Would Bump Elliott be great in this one? Well, maybe he's actually different, but it's not just about being a former coach and now you move up, kind of like at a high school where we're cross legs and coffee and hey, what do you think about this? Let's get it's not the situation with those things. So I think this is a good move for Iowa in so many different ways. Brings in, and I think people are going to like what she's going to do with Carver. They have a feasibility study that's underway or complete, and then there's she wants to bring the students close. And in my quote, now that it's published, I can read it. It's pretty good, from her. Hopefully, it's stayed in. But moving people around is more complicated than it sounds. We want to honor and serve all of our longtime fans and season ticket holders. At the same time, you're inviting your student body in. So this would be an opportunity while you're making some shifts to sort of accomplish everything at once. But it's hard to argue when you're at those venues that seat students near the floor, what a difference it makes. And so, whereas, Gary was stand pat on everything at Carver, everything from, what changed over 18 years? The burrito lift, the new scoreboard in the middle. What else? Nothing. There was the new practice facility, but that was in place in 2011 or 12 or something. So nothing changed about the atmosphere at Kinnick, at Carver. You got to do that, and we can talk all day, and we have, about the atmosphere for men's basketball games at Carver, but it comes down to the athletics department. And It may mean trimming some seats and making it a more intimate environment, but it's also about, you know what, give the students an opportunity to do it, because the current way is the wrong way. I think we can all realize that.
And it's going to take work, and it's going to take diplomacy, and
Yeah.
it's going to take some convincing, because you're going to have to convince some of the folks that have had season tickets close to the floor to move.
Mhm.
So that's going to take some give and take, and some work. It's going to take work. And previous to her, they haven't been willing to do that, put in the work and try to figure it out with everybody and make it. You're not going to make everybody happy, but do the best you can to have the best outcome. And that's again, her ability to work with people is going to be big when you're talking about something like that.
And she comes across so well. Like there's a strength and a humility, and that I think is rare among leadership like that. I mean, somebody who was in that, a similar chair until today as her was Jane Meyer, and it didn't work very well because she had a different way of doing things that people didn't adjust to, didn't like very much, to be nice. Gary obviously catered more to the donors and less so to the other factions, and whether he wanted to or thought about it, it didn't happen, so it doesn't matter. And I think with Beth, she's gone in a way where it's now time to make all those changes, and it'll be a better product. And it's going to have to, one of the things with Carver that's probably good, probably from your end, from shooting pictures, but from another side is the seats are so far from the court. I mean, hell, I think the seats at Kinnick are closer to the field than they are at Carver.
You might be right.
And you need to adjust the arena and some, bring it forward and inside a little bit to make it work. And it might be, have some sort of there's no concourse, there's no natural concourse, but you're going to have to do something. And there's not enough restrooms. It's too far to walk. I mean, the only thing edible there is the Carver cones. I mean, we've talked about this. This is like putting the Tiger Hawk on the water tower, which of course is moving now. But so there are all these different things that have kind of stuck around forever. But I think this one's the biggest because it's the one the other ones are cosmetic. This is reality, and Beth seems to be the right person for that gig.
I'm excited. I'm excited for the future of Iowa athletics. I would encourage people to share that, but sometimes people want to take the wait and see approach like I'm doing with the Iowa offense. So I understand that as well. But if you just look at it objectively and look at it, has happened so far in the short time she's been in charge, maybe that gives you a little bit of encouragement that the future can be bright. I think it will be. We'll see. Let's take a break here. I'm sorry, Scott.
Oh, I was just going to say, one of the comments on my page, my tweet was, she's not good with football. Iowa needs an AD with football experience. So
there's going to be those people, Scott, that are mad at her for making – it seems like people are hanging their hat on – and Kirk was upset with this too, that the decision was made during the season. And that's going to be the knock on her making that decision. There are people that think she shouldn't have had been involved at all in making the decision. Then there are people that think she made and I've talked to these people, you have too, people that are, supportive of Iowa athletics, felt like she overstepped by doing it during the season. Whatever the case may be, it needed to be done. I don't think it affected the play on the field, making the decision when she did. If anything, the play on the field confirmed why that move needed to be made. So again, I get it. Nobody's going to have a 100% approval rating, but I think more people than not think this is a good hire.
Yeah, it's totally that way. And I understand the concern over that. I do. I think it's important, but I think it was the right time. In retrospect, the angst was palpable. It was so over the top after that Minnesota game, where one of the great touchdowns was taken off the board, but they still had a chance to win that game. They didn't. And the offense looked pathetic. It looked pathetic all year, and it looked pathetic at that point. And the fans were really starting to revolt. So overall, I think this is just
I think you could make an argument, Scott, that doing it at that time may have helped the team.
Yeah,
I think that's what you're saying. That basically it took that narrative off. About the offense, that it let people know. It let people know there was going to be change. The players, when we met with them on Tuesday, we didn't have to ask them about it anymore. It relieved a lot of pressure.
And I think a lot of fans kind of went, okay. And from I would say the majority, I mean, nobody was happy about the offense, but it's like, okay, there's going to be a change here. I don't have to be angry. And they didn't have to split their loyalty between, do I want to see this team win? And then, oh my God, they're going to keep Brian, versus, well, now I could root for them. And I know that it's going to change at some point. And I think there were some people who embraced the ugliness. It's like, yeah, this is not what we want to see, but they're our team, damn it. And for Brian, his last home game against Illinois, and they scored a touchdown. They won the game. They won the championship. It's the last time somebody's going to win a championship on the field in Big Ten at home like that. And he got a Gatorade or Powerade bath. It's Iowa. His players embraced him. He cried. His dad cried. His dad took an hour plus before he came to the press conference because he wanted to celebrate the moment. You wouldn't have gotten any of that. I mean, if they would have won and he was still the OC, then people would be like, damn, that means he's going to come back. And then how big of a fight would that have been in early December?
Yeah.
Saying we're 10-2, and you want to fire my offensive coordinator, my son, so I think it was the right time. It had to be done. And I think she did it the right way.
I agree. And I know other people don't, and that's fine because we are where we are, and we're moving forward. We're on where are we on to? Pittsburgh, Baltimore, New England. All right, now we're going to take a break. And I'm going to let folks know that support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Systems Unlimited, doing great work in our community for over half a century, and we certainly appreciate their support of our podcast. We're going to hear from a few more of our sponsors. Scott and I will be back on the other side to talk about, the transfer portal. We are back. Thank you to our sponsors. We appreciate their support and them allowing us to bring you these podcasts free of charge each week on Thursday. And we have a fresh Hawkeye-centric podcast every day of the business week, Monday through Friday. Former Iowa kicker Brian Hurley does a Hawkeye history podcast that I highly recommend. That usually drops on the weekend. So any day of the week, whether you're shoveling snow or mowing the lawn, listen to our podcast. We appreciate it, and please solicit our sponsors as well. They help bring these podcasts to you free of charge. No Patreon, any of that stuff. Scott, the Hawkeye fans were abuzz yesterday with the news that one Caden Proctor, offensive tackle from Alabama, graduate of Southeast Polk in Pleasant Hill, former Iowa verbal commitment. Many of you and most of you who are listening and watching us right now know the history here and know the background here. Caden flipped his commitment to Alabama late in the process. It created some ugliness, I will say, on social media channels. Ugliness that I'm pretty sure the family, in fact, I know the family has not forgotten. How much of a role that plays in his decision moving forward, we'll see. Because I think the positive part was that the Iowa coaching staff handled it very well. And it's important. And maybe, and I wrote this in my column, Scott, if there's a lesson or a positive that comes all out of all this, maybe it's not going to go away, but maybe it decreases the situation we saw when he flipped his commitment and the reaction, the negativity, the nastiness we saw on social media when that happened. And we see it, it's not, and I'm not saying it's, just Iowa where this happens. It happens all over. And maybe with the transfer portal and the new landscape of college athletics, people will take notice of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is something that everybody needs to internalize. I know I had yesterday, and the person who pretty much knew it in advance was Kennington Smith, former of the Register, who covers Alabama for us. And he alerted me. He's like, "Hey, FYI, he's going to enter the portal today, and Iowa seems to be a place that he's going to go." This does is, you're exactly right, that there's so many times that people have been so nasty to him in particular, but stop tweeting at the recruits. Morehouse made that like a rule. He's like, don't tweet at the recruits. And this is another reason. And then somebody tweeted at me and Kenny yesterday. He's like, Iowa fans hurries to scrub their timelines, and it's true. I mean, you're talking about kids, and kids make choices. Kids make decisions. I remember being, I don't know, when I was younger, when you're 17, 18 years old, you have wanderlust. You want to go see the world. You want to go see things and do things and experience life. And a lot of times that's go to a different location. I remember kind of the dream schools that we had growing up in Southeast Iowa were, like go to Florida State or Arizona State. And then after a while, a lot of the people who did kind of go away decided, well, I want to go to Iowa. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think people need to kind of say, okay, and what have you lost with this, by the way, if you're an Iowa fan, if he does come to Iowa, he went and had, he was the starting left tackle for every single game for the Goliath of college football. And I'm sure he learned a lot there, took a lot of lumps. So basically he would have done the same thing in Iowa. And now, if he does come back, you don't pencil him in, you mark Sharpie him in at left tackle and let him go. And you're getting a better player than you probably would have even after last year.
Yeah. And I don't know if folks noticed, but the SEC has pretty good edge players. And I wouldn't say he would be taking a step up by coming to the Big Ten. He certainly is going to face top competition. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the competition that Iowa played last year on its schedule compared to what Alabama played, I think he got a better training, so to speak, for his sophomore season, wherever that may be. And you have to figure, Scott, I've heard a lot about the homesickness and wanting to be close to home. And I think there is truth to that. But also in these situations, you have players, student athletes, their families. They've gone through the recruiting process now once. They have learned from that now, and they've also now had time in college to know what they want. So you would hope that they could make a more educated decision than they did a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And I think that can help Iowa in a lot of ways because some of the aspects of Iowa's program, the consistency, the stability, things like that, he plays 1 year at the Blue Blood program and then the head coach leaves, and there's a lesson to be learned there. So I think Iowa's right in the mix here. Would not be surprised if he ends up here. Not a done deal. I think for them, it's important for them to do their due diligence, to look around and make sure that Iowa is the right place so that he's here till he's ready to go to the league.
Yeah, and they have to, and it has to be a comfort level, and it can't just be hanging out with the guys' comfort level, and it has to be with the staff, school, where you live, that type of thing,
The
and
new offensive coordinator.
new offensive coordinator, of course. But I do think that if you're an offensive lineman, the infrastructure is there to be
Yeah.
successful. It's probably, if you're a quarterback or a receiver, that's probably where you'd be like, I'm waiting, and we're all waiting here. So but overall, I mean, this is the prodigal son returns, and as you said, I dug up the quotes that Tyler Barnes said a year ago when he spurred him. It's like, yeah, it stinks. But because we give ourselves the 24-hour rule when we lose a recruit like that, and then we got to move on. But he also said, I sent them a text and wished them the best of luck, and we're rooting for you. We got your back, and we're going to be, and you never know what happens in this transfer portal era. And on the side, Tyler had kind of mentioned to me, he's like, I don't know if he'll like it there. It's just a different vibe, and he'd been, as we know, even the first time they had an open opportunity after COVID, he was there. I sat with him at an open practice the whole time and talked to him for about half an hour, and he was wearing an Iowa shirt. And when Xavier Wampa committed, he was there in an Iowa shirt, and he was one of the last people to leave Wampa's press conference. And just there's so much that leads him to Iowa. It would be a shame. I would understand it if his family would feel uncomfortable with this, but I also think that you got to do what's best for him. I think that's got to be number one. And hopefully there would be some healing there. Maybe every party can kind of look at it and say, maybe except Iowa, I don't think they did anything wrong, but I think every other party can look at it and say, yeah, maybe we could have handled things better. And that includes the Iowa fans. And if this means that there's some introspective thoughts, like you said, Rob, that's a good thing in the long term.
And he has to be ready. Where at Alabama, he was another of the dudes, right?
Mm-hmm.
We saw with Caleb Downs.
Yeah,
he's a dude, and he's moving on. There are a lot of dudes at Alabama. He comes here, boom. He is the show. Yeah. He is the story. You'll write about it. I'll write about it. Everybody will write about it. Fans will celebrate it, and the spotlight immediately is boom. It's on him from the time he comes to campus. He has to be ready for that too. And that, I think, hasn't always worked well in the past with players. I'm thinking of Oliver Martin. I'm not sure he was comfortable in that role. They're different people, different situations, but that's the type of thing you have to not worry about, but at least examine if you're the family, to say, okay, this is a different situation for us. And he took quite a bit of heat from the fans in Alabama too for his play this year. So again, they understand better now what they're getting themselves into.
It was much more intense there than it would have been here. I mean, his struggles were, and that's a level, think of it. It's a lot like Iowa wrestling. If you go out there and you don't compete at a level that they expect, and it's that, you're a true freshman, who cares? Yep. You've got to go out and dominate. And if you can't dominate from day one, they will get after you. And they did. And that was something that he struggled with. And at Iowa, that's not going to quite be the case. I mean, people will complain. They'll say, God, he didn't play very well or whatever, but it's not going to be anything like that. So, and if there is a, positive, I mean, if he decided to come now, he'd still be able to get into classes, because the semester just started 2 days ago, and you could still find a way in. Although, man, leaving Alabama for Iowa in this weather,
He grew up here though, so he's used to it.
Yeah, exactly. So, but anyway, and if he got here by the weekend, he could start classes probably online. You could do that anyway, and move up here and get involved, and it would be an acclimation period for him. I mean, yes, his friends and the teammates and the people who he knows on campus will meet him with him, but we won't talk to him. Fans won't watch him compete but once, and that'll be in mid to late April anyway. And so he'd have kind of a full run before he would have to really be accountable or be visible to the public. So, this would be a good period for him. And then you look at the ramifications, it instantly elevates this offensive line. And let's look at it from the football perspective.
Who wants to have some fun? Let's figure out, if he gets here, what the depth chart looks like. Let's roll, Scott.
He's their left tackle. Agreed. I mean, Mason's been the left tackle for 3 years. Mason, will start somewhere, but not at left tackle if you've got Caden Proctor. Caden Proctor's a potential first-round draft pick at that position. He's like Tristan or Alaric Jackson, so you put him in there. And then you kind of shuffle the line. What does that mean? Does it mean somebody like Nick DeYoung, who's coming back for a 6th year, is kind of the swing guy? Yeah, maybe. Where do all these people go? I don't know. I think that's overall.
There is an opening at left guard now with Rusty moving on, starting left guard. So
right. But that would have been Nick DeYoung,
right, coming back. So you're right. It does complicate the equation a little bit.
Yeah.
And do you move Richmond to right tackle? Kirk has said that Dunker is a tackle.
Yeah.
But can he play guard?
Yeah, I think he can. I mean, he started at guard in the bowl game. I think they just felt like they needed a tackle.
Yeah.
Because frankly, I kind of felt like they were playing with 4 guards and a center the last few years. And and so Dunker was a guy that he's got the size. You throw him out there, you leave him out there, you let him see how he competes, and he competed fairly well, I thought. Maybe they just say, he's still out there, and let's maybe Richmond's a guard along with Colby and, or DeYoung, and compete, and DeYoung could be your swing guy, and, he's coming back for an extra year, so kind of, that sucks for him. But what does that do outside of those 5 or 6? Well, you can't worry about that anymore. You can't worry about hurting people's feelings. Now you certainly wouldn't want a freshman or a sophomore, or redshirt freshman to transfer because of this. I don't think anybody would be dumb enough to do that, but an upperclassman might. They might say, God, I'll just throw a name out here. Tyler Ellsbury, who I thought played really well when he played last year. Maybe he looks at this and goes, I'm not going to get on the field now. This shuffles the deck to the point where I'm number 7, 8, maybe I need to go somewhere else, but you hate to say it, but if you could trade Caden Proctor for Tyler Ellsbury, I mean, come on, I don't want to be that way, but you got to be that way. It's about winning on the field, and Caden Proctor could be an all Big Ten guy. I don't know that maybe Dunker has that in him, maybe Jones, but it might be a little tough. So
I think a good thing too with this, Scott, is the guys that were in Iowa's 2023 class, a lot of them built relationships. I mean, I talked to Leighton Jones about it. I talked to Trevor Lauk about it. They felt bad when Caden decided not to. They had built the bonds and relationships. He knows guys that are in his recruiting class, so to speak. And obviously I'm sure there are plenty of Southeast Polk, just general student population that go to Iowa that he probably has friends with, and X, we know that they're close. So a lot going for Iowa. I think the big question is, what does this mean for Jennings Dunker's defense of the Solon beefsteak email talks?
Hey,
where
Kate,
does Proctor fit in here?
You know what? I'm going with Jennings Dunker, man. Nobody's ever going to beat him. Proctor's
Ric Flair. If you want to be the man, you got to beat him.
Yes. I mean, if there's anybody that's going to beat him, it's going to be Logan Jones, because he hates losing to him. So, Caden's got a lot of work to do in that area. But I think strength and potential wise, this could be one of the stronger offensive lines Iowa's ever had if he comes. And going back to the offensive coordinator position, if you look and you say, I've got Luke Lachey, who's maybe the best tight end in the country, and you've got Caden Proctor, who's got that kind of potential. And then I've got 5 other guys that have been starters for 2 seasons or the better part of 2 seasons, and running backs that have shown potential to be really good. I can work with that. Now it's about, we got to get the quarterback position up and healthy and up, and then you got to get your receiver position, accelerated. And that's why, there's a new coach coming there too. And you could probably bring your guy for that. Overall, I think this is, that's a healthy situation. And even though it's only one player, but one player, when you especially when you talk about offensive line, if you shuffle all the chairs, that one player matters a lot because, Mason, I think, is a really good offensive lineman. He's not going to be an NFL guy at left tackle, but maybe he could be an NFL guy at guard. Maybe he could be at right tackle potentially, but probably more like a guard. Well, if he goes into that position, he stabilizes guard because he's probably been the best, most consistent lineman when healthy, that Iowa's had in the last couple of years. So it could be, depending on quarterback play and receiver, Iowa could go from being a pauper to maybe not nobility, but certainly upper level.
They can go from like Walmart to Target. Is that a jump up, or
there you
Kmart
go?
To Target?
Yeah, Kmart, Goodwill to.
You touched on it. You beat me to it. The Kelton Copeland news. We haven't talked about that yet. That happened after our podcast last week. Makes sense. You bring in an offensive coordinator. You've talked about it, Scott. We've talked about it on the podcast. The passing game needs help. I think you bring in an offensive coordinator, quarterback, coach, some combination of that with a new wide receiver coach. Get everybody who has the same mindset on the same page. That's a positive in trying to push this offense forward.
Yeah, it is. Rob, when you look at the first 4 classes that included wide receiver for Kelton Copeland, 18 through 21, there were 9 freshman receivers. 7 of them transferred, and another one went to baseball. That one's not his fault because Brody Breck's going to play in the baseball. But that's 8 out of 9, and the only other one is Nico that stayed. The whole race. That's got to stick to somebody. Yes, it could stick to Brian Ferentz. He's had enough arrows that he looks like a porcupine. But but it also has to stick to the wide receiver guy. And then you have Charlie Jones leave, and you just. After a while, it's like, what are you doing? You got to do something more. There were more, the last 2 years were the worst years that Iowa's had for receivers catching the ball since 1978. And then you can't look past some of the comments that he's made when he's had, the last 2 years. He's really kind of tried to absolve himself in some ways and turn it on the program as that's a fault for why the wide receivers aren't involved. But, I remember with Amir and Brandon, they should have gotten the ball more. I won't disagree with that. But when you look at, in 2019, receivers caught 169 passes from Nate Stanley, which was the tied for the highest in Iowa history. And to see them drop the way they did, and it's because of, it's your recruits. It's on you. And, I liked him personally, don't get me wrong, but Iowa needs somebody better at that position.
And just for folks that weren't keeping track, the receiver position in 2023 caught 76 passes for 754 yards and 3 touchdowns. 4 receivers caught passes total.
Yeah.
4 different receivers. Nico, Seth Anderson, Caleb Brown, and Deontay Vines. They were the only receivers to even catch a pass this year.
Right. And, look at Caleb Brown. He probably became the best receiver by the end of the year. How long did it take him before he got in there? And it was only because of Deontay Vines' injury. Is that Brian's fault? You know what? I think it's the wide receiver coach has a lot to do with that. The wide receiver coach is the one who works with that person all the time and is the one that can go to the offensive coordinator. It's like, hey, I think he's ready to play. I think he's doing the right things. Let's get him to go. And that to me is part of the problem here. So it needed to happen. It's for the best for the program. The new OC will now, I'm sure, Kirk will have the final say, but if they say, look, I think this guy will be a really good fit for us, it might be him, and it also could be somebody like John Budmeyer too, for that matter. We don't know, but that wouldn't be a surprise either. But maybe they get more out of it that way. I don't know.
That's the key, though. I mean, we've talked about it in this podcast. You have to get better play from the quarterback position, and you have to get better production from the wide receivers, and they go hand in hand. And that needs to be really the focus, because you can still do what you want to do with blocking schemes. You can still run the ball the way you want to run it, whether you're counter or inside zone or outside. You can still do all that stuff, but you gotta fix the passing game.
Yeah. It is so complicated, Rob, and the depth, the passing tree, the spacing of the field, it was just not good. There were times when you needed secondary routes and they weren't there, and that's coordination, obviously. That's play design, but you've got to be able to do that. I remember there was one play where I think it was when they had a strip sack against Minnesota. It was Tyler Newbin coming blitzing from a safety position and stripping Deacon Hill, and I'm looking at the route and what's going on there, and they're like all three either posts or goes. There's nobody in like this field of like from the center of the field, not even the hash mark, but the center of the field to the sideline in like a 15-yard area depth wise, and I'm going,
it's startling when you see shit like that.
Yeah, you're like, man, this is a 3-man route. You can't get max protection because you're not good enough at it, and yet there's nobody there. There's no outlet or anything. So I think overall, coordination, the scheme, everything has to work hand in hand, and then you also need better coaching. That's what it comes down to, and
development.
Yeah, and Deacon's not the guy. We know that. Maybe Marco is, maybe he isn't. But you want to get the OC in here to evaluate everybody, and then if that means that you need to get a quarterback after spring ball, get a quarterback. Go do your thing. And I know that they're over on scholarships, and people seem to be anxious about that. Don't be. Things work out. There's going to be some medical guys, and then there's going to be some guys that realize after spring ball that, man, I don't want to be, I'm a junior and I'm third team at best, and there's more guys coming in my position. It's probably time for me to leave. And then there might be a couple of guys that have to be told to leave.
I'm thinking about a comment on my Proctor story on Facebook, and somebody said, if Proctor wants to come back, make him walk on. Realizes the error of his ways. That's that Twitter account message board.
Yeah. It should be on that. It's like, guys, do you want to win or not? Do you want to win or not? And people think of it as like this privilege to play at Iowa, and it is to an extent, but it's also Nebraska fans.
Business.
Yeah, Nebraska fans think it's a privilege to play at Nebraska.
Yeah, it's a business.
And it's business for everybody, players included.
Well, we don't have a ton of time for non-football related because of the news with Beth Getz getting hired as AD took up some of our time, but I do want to at least touch on wrestling and men's and women's basketball, and the transition from football goes well to wrestling, Scott, because a young man who played football this season and just finished up January 1st at the bowl game wrestled for the first time a few weeks later and actually won his match. Ben Keeter, I know he was not the way I looked at this, Scott, I'm interested to hear it because we haven't talked about this yet. I know he's pissed because he likes to dominate, and if you watch the match, he was gassed by the end. A lot of different conditioning is different for football and wrestling, but to think about what he did, being basically all of his time dedicated to football since the summer, to get on the mat in a Big Ten match against a rival. Granted, the kid wasn't ranked in the top 10, but he was still ranked, and to win that match. That's pretty incredible stuff.
Yeah, no question it is. Yeah, I watched the match because I was like, following along on Twitter
Well, everybody was mad Friday when he
yeah,
didn't get to wrestle the other football guy from
yeah.
Nebraska.
I don't know if that would have been a good one for
I
him.
don't know.
I mean, the one thing with Huckmacher or whatever from Nebraska is, Nebraska's season's been over since Thanksgiving, so he's had an opportunity to
Exactly.
get into wrestling shape. Iowa's season ended January 1st, and he still needed a day or two to fly back, before he could start focusing exclusively on wrestling. So, but following it along, it was during the playoff game, the NFL playoff game, and I was like, oh shoot, I got to check this out. And you watch him, and yeah, he was gassed. And if that match would have lasted 10 more seconds, he might have lost.
Yep.
And I'm sure he looked pissed. He looked like, I can't believe, like, oh man, I'm in for something here. Good. He kind of could use that dose of humility after just annihilating competition at City High for 4 years and the world and everything else like that. So what's that going to do? He's going to go and work his ass off like he always does, and he's going to be better for the next time he goes out there. And and he infuses the program, no question. I don't know if he'll be an All-American this year. I kind of think he will be. I don't know about a national champion, but I think he's good enough that once he starts getting back into wrestling shape, that he'll be very competitive in the Big Ten and around the country. But I think this is really interesting. And then for a program that's lost Spencer Lee a year ago and has had so many absences because of the gambling situation, to now have him, Ben Keeter be the guy like that. This is I think this will infuse the program for casual fans that always pay attention, but I don't really have too many guys to latch onto right now.
Great story. It should be a great story moving forward. Looking forward to see if he wrestles in the Penn State duel against Kurt Vliet, because he needs to get ready for that if he's going to move into that. But we'll address that when we get to it. Iowa won both of its duels, beat two top 10 ranked teams at the time, Nebraska on Friday, Minnesota on Sunday. Pretty solid victories of both of those two. So that team's developing. Tom Brands has done a good job getting transfers in, filling holes in his roster. Will be interesting to see how this team develops. The women's basketball team is developing nicely. 15 wins in a row, Scott. Was there Saturday night, as were you, to watch the game against Indiana. A lot of buildup for that. Fox, Gus Johnson, people coming out in sub-zero weather to watch. A great environment. And Iowa really, really looked good. That game, you watch a team go through a season and you're like, how good is this team? When I saw them Saturday night, I thought, this team has a chance. This team has a chance to win it all.
Yeah, it does. That was their best game that I've seen in a long time for them. And probably since last NCAA tournament, I think this is their best game of the year. And the way they all played, the intensity, the environment, give yourselves a hand. I mean, that was something. And to be, when Molly Davis hit, I think it was hit the first three for Iowa, I had it at like 113 decibels.
Wow.
And it was the highest I've ever recorded, because I don't do it for every game, but I do it for the ones that are, need to have it. The highest is 119 with Caitlin's shot against Indiana last year. And then like Peyton Sanford's hit against Michigan State was like 116, 115, something like that. So, but the way that they played, and here's what's interesting is we've been focused so much on what they don't necessarily have when it comes to the post and replacing McKenna Warnock and replacing Sinano and everything like that. But then what they've done is saying, okay, we may not be our strength, but you guys got to try to guard us. And we'll go out with four guards that are way better than yours, and we'll beat you up and down the floor. And there's nothing you can do about it, because our transition game is the best in the country.
And few posts can run with Hannah Stuelke up and down the court, rim to rim.
Oh yeah, I mean, she's a Randy Moss. I mean, when it comes to female posts or power forwards, and Mackenzie Holmes kind of had an off night, but she wasn't really she didn't impact the game the way that maybe I thought she would. Now, if they get in a half court situation all the way around, then that changes things. But when I was running in transition like that, shit, forget it. They're the best in the country, and nobody's going to stop them. Nobody, not LSU and UCLA, anybody.
And then you say, okay, well, you've got this big environment. You get the big win. Everybody's patting you on the back. Do you have a letdown a few days later? Nope. Just wiped Wisconsin out. What have they beat Wisconsin like 30 times in a row somewhere?
29.
High 20s.
29.
Something crazy, just dominant. But win that one by 46. Big one Sunday, Scott. Another national TV. Ohio State's a really good team. This is a huge challenge on Sunday. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and it leads right into an NFL playoff game. I mean, this tells you a lot about women's basketball and Iowa basketball, that NBC will say, you know what, let's put this game here and lead into an NFL, not a men's basketball game, no, they're going to go with the women's basketball game with the most popular figure in the country. And
weren't the numbers really good Saturday night too?
They were over 1 million, which when you got to consider what's it going against.
Yep.
It's going against an NFL playoff game, and that
it was the Chiefs.
Yeah, Mahomes. It was the Chiefs, Mahomes. Freezing weather. Miami Dolphins have a great offense. Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
And they had 28 million viewers. No matter what, that's never going to. You just can't compare to the NFL to anything. But compared to everything else, it was pretty close. And yeah, the other networks had shows that were a little bit higher than them, regular scheduled TV shows, but not much. So, getting 1 million viewers for a women's basketball game, it probably was higher than you get for a good men's basketball game. And having Gus there, I talked to Gus for like 15, 20 minutes before the game, and actually for a little longer than that, and did a lot of, interviews on that and wrote about it. And he was stoked. He's like, I have never seen her play. I want to see her play. She is, he compared her to Jordan, the way she does things. And, and the environment was off the charts. But as you said, one thing Wisconsin did that was really stupid was the bench started talking a lot of shit to Caitlin Clark. And then Caitlin was looking over and then started John with Marissa Mosley, the coach, about it. And it's like, if you wanted to catch them sleepwalking in a trap game, don't fire her up.
Sneak up, man. Don't make a racket. Sneak up on them.
Frustrate her. Don't get her in that position. So, and then the rest of the team responded as well. I mean, they were burying them, and it wouldn't. It was the type of game where I thought towards the end, I could, if I could leave in their starters longer just to get to 100, just to whack them that much harder. But still, Ohio State's going to be a good game. But no,
and that was without Hannah against Wisconsin.
Right.
So they would have had 100 had they had Hannah. And hopefully she's good to go on Sunday. They're going to need her in Columbus. Want to wrap up with some men's basketball talk, Scott. We talked about it a few weeks ago. They started 0-3 last year, came back and won the next 3. 0-3 this year, came back and won the next 3. So we knew it was going to be a process with this team with what it lost last year. All it could do when it started 0-3 was to get to 3-3, with the next 3 games, and it's done that. We talked about it last week. It seems like this team's starting to gel a little bit. Guys are figuring out their roles. Tony Perkins is settling into the point guard spot. That allows Fran to use Harding and Bowen together on the second team as combo ball handlers to take pressure off them. That's working well. Kripke's been the most consistent guy on the team all year. He continues to bring it. Sanford had an off night at Minnesota shooting wise, and they were able to overcome that because Josh Dix is emerging now. So good signs with the Iowa men's basketball team. Far from out of the woods yet. We'll get a good litmus test on Saturday afternoon at Carver Hawkeye Arena.
Yeah, playing number 2 Purdue will tell you exactly where you want to be. But
they got a tall guy.
Yeah, they've got a guy that's fairly well known, defending National Player of the Year. But kind of back to our previous conversation a little bit. You notice that with Peacock, that the curtain raiser is Purdue men, and the main event is Iowa women. They both have returning National Players of the Year. this is a new world. I mean, because Zach Edey, Purdue basketball, even Purdue, Indiana was earlier. Now I know that it was Eastern time zone and all, but that doesn't usually happen. Usually you have your main one in the higher primetime slot.
There's room for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. But, the one thing we haven't discussed, except for briefly off the top, is Fran McCaffrey is now the wingest coach in Iowa men's basketball history. And, as much as we've talked about, Kirk 144, passing Hayden Fry and how big of a deal that was. And this is a big deal too. I mean, Tom Davis is, certainly widely respected. I don't know about how beloved. I think it depends on the person, but certainly well respected for his tenure. Fran it's a little bit more ambiguous. And I think
if you look at it though, Scott, you were around when Dr. Tom was let go.
Yeah.
There are a lot of parallels with Fran and how they're viewed. And I think over time there will be a greater appreciation for what Fran has done here. Different personalities, obviously, way different personalities, but I think time has healed some of the knocks, the criticisms of Dr. Tom. And I think that will happen with Fran to an extent as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think Dr. Tom, I remember when he was inducted in the Hall of Fame 15 years ago, the Iowa Hall of Fame, and he was on the field that day, football field, and you could see he was tearing up because everybody cheered him. And I don't think that people dislike Dr. Tom, as the person, the clapping, that he had his little, quirks, but other than that, I think everybody liked him personally and the way he handled himself. I think with Fran, it is different. Now he's fiery and some people really like that. A lot of people think he goes over the line. Does he, ingratiate himself enough with the public? And, those are all valid discussions. But I think you look statistically and how they performed in the Big Ten across the board, it is almost identical. The only real difference is that in the NCAA tournament, Dr. Tom won every first round game, but, for a 10-year period, he walked in with the greatest collection of athletes in Iowa basketball history. Fran walked in with the worst. So if you just remove the first 2 years and you go forward, Fran's had a little bit more success. And then in that 10-year period until the last year for Dr. Tom, when he went to the Sweet 16, he never got past the second round. And that's really what caused a lot of the angst of, man, when are we going to go to the next level? It just feels like we're
the next level. That was the line when Alford was brought in.
Yep.
Going to take the program to the next level.
And for 25 years, it's been, kind
the same level as Dr. Tom. That's been the ceiling.
Yeah.
We won't know until Fran moves on if that is raised, if somebody gets it to the next level, so to speak.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I thought was cool was Dr. Tom's guys, so to speak, Ryan Lersman, Kent McCausland, Duez Henderson, they all were very complimentary of Fran. Mm-hmm. And, their love for Dr. Tom, but also the respect they have for Fran. And that tells me a lot. I mean, I think he's gone over the line, with officials at times and his behavior sometimes, but his guys do love him.
Yeah, it's true. And I think the things that he's done really well is he's brought the past back to, Alford didn't do it, of course, because Alford was bigger than life. Licklider just was too much of an introvert to do it. But Fran has brought the former Iowa players under the Iowa tent, and they feel like they're important. As you said, Kent McCausland, I've talked to him about it. Jess Settles, of course, right? All those guys feel like, okay, Fran is there with them. The Street family. Yeah, he couldn't be more close to them. But then there's the general public, though, Rob. And this is where the questions lie. Is he doesn't really do that with the public as much. And this is where, fan engagement and why the attendance is going down. Do they feel like Fran is there for them? And that's not so much the case. I mean, you take a look at the things that have been kind of stripped away over the years, the black and gold blowout or whatever it is, shirts and skins before games, the PTL, even the in-state games, playing Drake in Northern Iowa at home, and then the Big Four Classic. All of that is just kind of has gone away. And those are windows, opportunities. As we know, when we go to the PTL on Sunday afternoons or Wednesday nights, that was an opportunity for several hundred fans to watch them play, maybe get to meet them, maybe get an autograph, for us to interview them, to have videos on our websites and to write about them. And fans got the chance to kind of get to know the players a little bit and see them compete. That's all gone. And what do we write about in June now? Nothing about basketball. It's football. And so you remove that from the equation, and then you start to look at the games that they play early in the season, Rob. I mean, there were no non-conference games at home of any value this year. And and then part of it's not their fault with the ACC Big Ten Challenge going away, but bring somebody else in. And then they have the exempt tournaments, but they were going and playing Gonzaga and Sioux Falls and playing Cincinnati and Chicago, and it's like, bring something back to your fans.
The game in Des Moines, that wasn't very attractive, but again, there was a game that was away from Carver Hawkeye.
Yeah, and that one doesn't bother me because it's still kind of in the state and it was different. But that you start taking away stuff, and how do you replace it? What do you do? I remember a couple of times they had like a Midnight Madness Friday night introduction, and they didn't have anything like that. And, whether it's, and all that adds up. It adds up over time. And then the postseason exits, that you don't have a lot of equity in the bank. If the years when Luka Garza was there, if you could have gotten, especially the last year, if you could have gotten to the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight, then that helps you out when you're not quite good enough. Last year they were okay, and then you get to the tournament and they're one and done. But this year they're fighting. They look like a fun team to watch, but I think fans have kind of checked out. Right and wrongly.
It looks like it's happening across the country too. I'll flip on a game, on ESPN, and it looks like Carver, and it's SEC or Big 12 or ACC. It's happening all over, and that's something I think that the college basketball world needs to address. And certainly that's something for the new athletic director at Iowa to address. Get the men's basketball attendance back up. And how do you do that?
Yeah.
And you work with the coach, you work with the coaching staff, you work with the program, you work with the fans. What do you want? What do we need to do to get your ass in the seats? And hopefully that happens.
And I don't think it's an impossible, situation, by any stretch. I mean, you look at the women's game. I mean, they're rock stars. But next year they're going to lose a lot of pieces, and so Caitlin Clark is the exception. And then, I think men's basketball, we've seen it, the interest being at a high level, at a peak, and I think it's capable of getting there again. I'm not sure it's going to happen under Fran, though. I'll just be honest. I don't know that. I think fans have kind of, if he decided to step away, Rob, after this year, and let's say they go to the tournament and they win a game, and he decided this is it for me, I think it'd probably most part be, all right, thank you, we appreciate you, but it wouldn't be like, people, holding on to his ankles, please stay, I think it would just be, okay, what's next, and but it's been a cumulative effect. It hasn't just been something overnight.
And we won't know what's next until we see what's next with all the programs that we've talked about, with coaches that have getting up there in years, we'll say, and get closer to the end of their careers than the beginning. One thing with Fran, and you look at, I think you look at what Kirk has done, what Lisa has done, what Fran has done in comparison to the history of their programs. And I think they all stack up pretty well from Fran's perspective. 4 NCAA tournaments in a row. It would be 5 had there not been COVID. That would match the longest streak to the NCAA tournament in program history. 85 to 89 was 5 in a row. If they make it this year, that will match that as well. So you don't know what's coming next, but there's always the possibility to go down. There's always the possibility to go up. And I never tell people be careful what to wish for because you just don't know. It could
Yeah.
be better. It could be worse. We don't know.
Right. It's, and going back, and both of us are old dudes, so we remember the situation with Tom Davis, and we remember the interest in Alford at that time. Let's strip away, the Alford problems since then, but
I think there was a sentiment that they got who they wanted in Alford and they settled for Kirk Ferentz.
Yes, for sure, because people wanted Bob Stoops.
Exactly.
And I remember I was there at Kirk's, at Steve Alford's press conference, sitting next to Bob Bowlesby, and sitting next to me was the West kid. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot his name.
Glenn Worley.
Yes. God, how did I forget that?
He texted at me last night, so it was on the top of it.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'm sitting next to him at the press conference, and then in the very back of the room was Kirk Ferentz standing up against the wall. And I remember mentioning it to my, wife at the time, my fiance, and I'm like, that's kind of unusual, just kind of by himself, not saying anything. And, but you look at, Tom, it felt stagnant. It did. There were, as we mentioned, there were 10 years there where they didn't advance the Sweet 16. And this was a program that we saw with Lute, especially, and then early in Tom's career where they were in the Elite Eight, they were in the Final Four, they made the Sweet 16 with regularity, and then to always be win one, lose one, and a lot of their better teams, like with Andre Woolridge and Ryan Bowen, they were, they never really got lucky in their draws, but there was a lot of people wanting to move on, especially after Rafe LaFrance decided not to come to Iowa, and be careful what you wish.
And then the irony there is once it was told he wouldn't be back, they made the Sweet 16.
Right. You didn't have to worry about anything else. But they also were a 5 seed and they played a 4.
Yep.
So that's a coin flip game. You win those games, and then they played well in the Sweet 16 against UConn and were leading with 8 minutes to go or whatever it was. And,
I remember interviewing Jim Calhoun and how complimentary he was of Dr. Tom and how he was like, I can't believe they're letting him go.
Coaches are coaches.
I know. It's a tight fraternity.
Yeah. But you look at, in Steve's case, he was the hot young coach and he had the name recognition and fans responded. There were sold out season tickets for a couple of years after that. And then
they beat UConn in New York.
Yeah, to open this, number one UConn, to start the era. I mean, most people thought, wow, here we go. And basketball was it was probably the one time in the last 45, 50 years where basketball had kind of tilted itself ahead of football and fan interest. And then of course it just went, and that's where it kind of is today. And, nobody could have foreseen the issues with Steve Alford off the floor. The Pierre Pierce situation, I think, is still, the ramifications of that are profound, because I think a lot of fans were disgusted by the way that went down and put them out of sight.
And there have been people that haven't come back since.
Yeah, right. A lot of people were just like, I can't believe they did that. And they either haven't come back or their interest level is waned. And then we get from there to kind of the Licklider era and games on BTN, and they sucked, and the weather was like it is now. And at that point, it was like, well, out of sight, out of mind. And Fran has done a nice job of building it back up, but taking that big, hard step hasn't happened yet. And ultimately, it's cost, fans are kind of like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to build myself up if we're just not going to ever get there. So
will be interesting, Scott, to see what the crowd looks like on Saturday.
Yes.
Saturday matinee in Carver Hawkeye Arena against the second-ranked team in the country. If you can't get people out to that, I'm not sure what the future holds and what the picture looks like if that's the case.
Mm-hmm. No question. Because and this is Purdue too. It's not. I mean, like 2 weeks ago, they played Rutgers, and I was a little bit like, oh boy, it was like listed at 9,200, and it was probably 7,500 there. Okay, but they were unranked, but it was still a nice day, all things told in January. But now you've got number 2 ranked Purdue, a rival that you've played for 100 plus years. If you can't get people here for this, sometimes things just kind of peter out.
Yep, we'll see, and we'll see what goes on with this team. At least it's back on its feet now at 3-3 in the league and has a puncher's chance to make it to the NCAA tournament again. I think people are engaged again, maybe not to the level that we would want, but they're getting there. The women's team is flying. The wrestling team has great storylines. We talked about Ben Keeter, so plenty to talk about. If you're new to our podcast, we kind of just riff here, and that's what happened today. We just go till it's over, and now it's over. Scott's going to get on. He's got another podcast coming up at the top of the hour, so check that out if you want more Hawk talk. He and I will be back next Thursday to hopefully talk about a new offensive coordinator, but we're making no promises. But hopefully that's the case.
I figure the perfect scenario is February 2nd, Groundhog Day.
That would be appropriate. That would certainly make a lot of sense. So, all right, folks, we're getting out of here. We appreciate everybody for listening. Appreciate our sponsors. Scott and I'll be back next week to talk to you on the Hotspot podcast. Until then, be well and peace. Say goodbye, Scott.